that do the best. God damn these fucking Mexicans ruining my fucking show! Anyway.
He's got the leaf blower out now.
What the fuck?
I think they heard you in this.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Blue State Survivalist. I've got Era Shogun, and we've got a very special guest, Justin, from Fenix Ammunition, to talk about the ammo shortage and what's going on in the industry right now. Justin, how are you doing?
Well, we're hanging in there, doing our best to stay as far ahead as we can. It's been an interesting year, to say the least, both exciting and frustrating at the same time. I'm sure you guys can understand being on the consumer end of things, but on the manufacturing and the industry side, it's definitely been not the year that we expected it to be, both for good and for bad.
So, I mean, what is going on? Like, is it just the panic buying that's leading to this?
Sure. So, from our perspective, we first noticed that things were starting to get off the rails right around when most of the states started to enact COVID lockdowns. So, you know, I wouldn't consider myself to be some kind of a really, ragged edge prepper type, but even back in the sort of end of January, beginning of February, the forums that I'm on and some of the folks that I know in different parts of the country, we were starting to talk about this whole coronavirus thing, and you were seeing leaked videos from China of people literally dropping to the floor in the street and things like that. And so, you know, it was one of those things where you start chatting with the people in your group, and you're saying, hey, you know, you guys seeing this thing? What do you think? Are you buying masks? Do you have masks? Have you heard anything, etc.? And then we started to look at the industrial sites where like places like Uline and McMaster Carr, where we get industrial supplies, and we were seeing that they were completely sold out of respirators of any type. We use respirators here for part of our process, and they had lines on those websites saying that they weren't going to sell any respirators to people who weren't already existing customers. So that started to raise those alarm bells where, okay, hey, maybe people are starting to stock up on these things. And this was long before anybody in the United States, Fauci or any of these folks were even talking about masks. At that point, they were saying that masks were something that were never going to be a thing.
Right.
And so then you get into, as that starts to progress and it starts to come here, and people are discussing, well, you know, is this going to just be another false alarm, or is this going to become something? And then, of course, the media picks it up. It becomes a political and election cycle topic as much as it is a real health discussion. So then you get into March, and states are starting to think about locking down. You have them talking about closing entire industries, schools, etc. And so as those were starting to become imminent, that's where we started to see the first big uptick in sales. So in a couple of days before lockdowns were announced here in Michigan, we had a day where we saw about double the traffic on our website that we might normally see. And I looked at that and thought, okay, we had a good day, but maybe it was just a couple of big purchases, something like that. And then the next day it was 2.5 times normal. Then the next day it was 3 or 4 times normal. And we were seeing a trend. And then the Friday that, I think it was March 19th, where they announced the big lockdowns here in Michigan, that's where we saw a massive surge. We saw 10 times the normal buying volume on a Friday, at which point I rushed back to the office. I had left a little bit early, and I got back to the office, started sending purchase orders to all of our suppliers, and that continued through the weekend to the point where by the time Monday, Tuesday came around, we were looking at ourselves saying, well, how do we stop this? how do we slow down the amount of traffic we're getting on the site, because we just don't have the resources to keep up. We're a small business, but we don't want to turn away what are going to be good customers. So how do we start to manage that? And so that was mid to late March. So really that's where all the, I would say, panic buying started, was really due to coronavirus. So then as we get into April and May, things started to continue. And as we get to the end of May, our suppliers are telling us, hey, look, we have no idea. You guys are sending these purchase orders, but we have no idea when we're going to be able to supply these materials. So you should really start to plan. You need to start planning for the long term. These things may not be available for months, and they may not be available in the quantities you need them to be for months and months. And then we get into June, where we have the George Floyd incident, and then that perpetuated a whole nother source of panic buying. So you went from sort of the prepper conservative types who might already have a lot of guns and ammo but just wanted to stock up, moving into people that don't own any guns and are seeing cities being burned down, people being attacked in the streets. They go to the gun store, and the guy at the gun store says, well, you've got this gun, but you need ammo. And these people say, well, I don't have any. How much do I need? And they say, well, you need a few thousand or 10,000 or whatever the gun store guy tells them to buy. So then you have this whole fresh group of people that are starting from square zero. They have nothing. And now they're trying to get to like a base level of stocking up, if you will. And then that, of course, triggers a whole nother panic buying type situation.
I mean, I only know how it was here. I was, call it lucky, but I bought like 10,000 primers before March. So I was pretty good for a while. And in March, they closed down all the gun stores for about 2 weeks here in New Jersey.
Right.
But then they got threatened with a lawsuit, and they decided to let them open. Like none of the ranges could open yet. They didn't let them open till July. But the stores could still open, like very limited. You know, you had to wait in your car until they called you and all of that. But at that point, I wasn't having a problem finding ammo. I was having a problem finding good ammo. You know, sure. I mean, most of it was frangible, and most of it, you know, was on the cheaper end. But I wasn't having a problem finding ammo yet. But when you walked in, the gun store itself was empty. Like the right. only guns you could find were like antique 1911s and, you know, a couple things like that. But then once the riot started, it was over. I mean, I went there yesterday to pick up a gun that I had transferred over, and they were just starting to get some guns back. Like they had maybe 2 or 3 Glocks, a few CZs, you know, and they had like maybe 100 shotguns for some reason. I guess Black Aces decided to start shipping, you know, like crazy. But you still like, I used to pay what, $35 for 1,000 primers. Now I'm looking eBay, Gunbroker, they're going for $200-300 for the same 1,000 primers.
Sure.
Yep, and the military surplus stuff, I mean, that's already been bought to hell, yeah. Like, because there was a time where you could easily get, like, Romanian or Russian surplus spam cans. You know, those things are actually preserved pretty well if you can get them. And now, if you find them, they're much higher in price, or it's just gone. I really wish I could have gotten some of those Romanian spam cans, because Romanian ammo, even though it's corrosive, it's really reliable.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's definitely shootable.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what do you see as being the future now, though? Like, when do you? I saw an interview with the head of CCI, and he was saying he doesn't see them getting back on track until July of this year, and that's only if demand remains consistent with what it is right now. If it goes up again, he said he doesn't know when they'll get back on track.
Yeah, I would say that's maybe even optimistic. I think it really depends on what we see. So part of the reason that the ammo was still available at the sort of during the coronavirus time was, as you said, in many areas gun ranges were closed or they were operating at reduced capacity. So people weren't consuming ammo on the premises at that point. They were just buying and hoarding. But then as you get into this whole surge of people buying guns for the first time due to civil unrest and, obviously you have the election cycle as well. So no matter what, this year would have been a big surge anyway, just simply due to it being a pretty contentious election. But now that the gun ranges are operating again, those are big consumers of ammo on the premises, and they need to have ammo in order to operate. A lot of people aren't aware that the margins in the gun industry are very, very low.
I can imagine.
The margin on ammunition is almost non-existent. Margin on guns is very low. Most gun stores are making $20 to $30 on a Glock because they're so competitively priced, and they have to compete with Bud's Guns and all the online stores, what have you. So their primary source of revenue is range time. And if the range is not operating, if people aren't consuming range time, then they're not making money. Most of the time when they bid out gun ranges, and I know this because I had looked into actually opening a gun range in downtown Detroit, in Detroit proper. So I talked with all the manufacturing companies that make the range equipment. And they basically project, they want you to assume 30% occupancy of the lanes during your business hours. So on the weekends, it's going to be close to 100%. On a Wednesday afternoon, it might be close to 0%, but they want you to average about 30% of capacity. So when you get into these COVID restrictions where they can only use every other lane potentially, or maybe even every third lane, something like that, many ranges are only 12 to 16 lanes. So that limits them to 4 to 5 lanes, maybe 8 at most. And now if they can't get ammo, then nobody's consuming ammunition at the range, which means they're not consuming range time. So they love to sell people this gun, but what they really want is to sell that person the gun and have them stick around and shoot 150 rounds in an hour on the range so that they make the money on the range time. So it's really actually impacted. People think that the gun stores must be just making money hand over fist right now. And for sure, most of them are doing okay, but that's a big problem. We get calls from ranges all the time, and they're literally begging us for ammo. They're willing to pay retail consumer price for ammunition just so that they can get people on the range. So, will things be sorted out by June, July? I really think CCI to say that. He would know his business better than me, but from the standpoint of somebody who buys CCI primers and talking with there's one large distributor who handles all of CCI's resale business to folks like us, and that distributor communicates to us all the time just how disorganized Orbital ATK, which is the company that owns CCI and Spear, they get truckloads of primers and they don't even know what's on the truck, and they have no notice that the truck is even on the way. Sometimes there isn't even a packing slip. So it takes them a day or two to sort out, well, we have 40 pallets of primers, but we don't even know what's here. We don't know how many small pistol, large pistol, small rifle, etc. So it takes them a little while to figure out what they even got, and then they have to decide how to allocate that to hundreds of mid to small market ammunition producers like us who have been sending them purchase orders for months. I mean, we've sent purchase orders for more than 20 million primers to the distributor that we buy them from, and we've received a fraction of that. So,
I mean, I remember like you were saying about the ranges. I remember back in August, the range that I was going to, they were so low on ammo. The only way you could buy ammo from them is if you also rented a gun to use on the range. They wouldn't let you buy either to take it out of the store or to use your own weapons.
Yeah, most of them right now, if they will sell you ammo, they'll only sell you a couple of boxes to leave, and usually it's defensive ammo. And if they're going to sell you more than 100 or 150 rounds, they're telling people that they have to consume it there on the premises because they need the range time. And also, a lot of ranges build into their profitability model the idea of reclaiming that brass and reselling it. And it's for large ranges, that's not a small amount of money. It can be several $1,000s a month.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Thousands of dollars per week, depending on what kind of volume they're doing. So
I mean, I shoot at a gun club
always
now.
pick up your brass.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
shoot at a
very
gun
religious.
club now, and I not only pick up my brass, but the brass can that they have for other people that don't feel like reloading it, I pick up theirs too. So,
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I'm the same way. I not only pick up my brass, but people next to me, I'll ask them if they want to keep their brass, and they're like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I
Sure.
go ahead and keep it.
That's smart.
I keep it because I reload it, but I mean, and it's not just CCI and the raw material manufacturers. I had an incident. I got a squib load back in July with my CZ, and I sent it in. They realized it was a manufacturing defect. They gave me a new gun and all that, but it took them. I got them the blown up gun in early August. I just got the gun to back like from them last week.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
and they told me they have no idea what they have anymore. He even said, he's like, do you want the original one you had, or do you want a different model? Like, do you want? And I said, well, what do you have like available now? He said, well, we have nothing now, but I can call you whenever something becomes available. But we usually find out like a couple weeks after things start getting here from overseas. You know.
Sure.
And I
Yep,
told him,
yeah.
I said, well, I want a Shadow if I can get it. And he said, well, I think that's probably because it's more the higher end. I think I could probably
Right.
get you one sooner. And literally, I just got it last week. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's not just, it's tougher for us because the raw materials that we need are tougher to procure. They go through more processes, but even gun manufacturers, there's only so many places that produce, for example, also body armor. There are only so many places that produce AR 500 and AR 550 steel. There's only so many steel mills in the world that are capable of producing that. So when you get a huge run, there really aren't that many people who make it. There's a lot of people who can cut it and shape it, but there aren't that many people making the raw material. For gun parts, same thing. The linchpin for AR-15 manufacturing in particular is a certain grade of steel called Carpenter 158, which is what's used in the actual bolt.
right.
And that's what you need to make a true mil spec bolt. There's other materials you can use, but it doesn't meet that mil spec qualification. So and again, there's only so many mills that are capable of producing Carpenter 158. It's a patented proprietary product. So on the primer, so for gun manufacturers, the supply chain disruption has been tough because, you got to have steel to make slides. And there are a lot of factories that have been shut down. They're having problems filling second and third shifts because they have too many employees that are out because of these virus restrictions and quarantining and things like that. And primer manufacturers are the same way. They design those primer plants to run at very high levels of capacity, just like the auto industry. If the plants are running below certain levels, they're losing money. So they're trying to run those things close to 80–90% capacity all the time. So when you have these big surges and you have a reduction in the labor force, especially because a lot of the primer plants are located in more remote areas because of what they're doing and the amount of exclusionary space they need between themselves and other businesses, it's tough to find people to work in a third shift in Black Hills, South Dakota on a moment's notice that are trained for that type of work. So it is a challenge for them.
Well, that was something the head of CCI also said. He said they could expand capacity tomorrow, but they said just training new staff to come in and get on the ammunition line. I'm sure you know the feeling. It's not a quick thing. It's not like you could just get people, train them in a week and get them going. Like it takes a while before they're, because I mean you're selling an explosive. It's not a little screw up. Like someone could lose a hand, someone could die.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, yeah. We hired 3 people this year so far. Between March and May, we hired 3 people, and those guys are just starting to get to the point where we feel that they are learned enough on the equipment that we have to be running it relatively not unsupervised, but they're working with guys that have been running the machines for a couple of years. But we started them off in packaging and then moved them into quality, where now they're starting to get more familiar with the ins and outs. Okay, this is what a bad round looks like. This is what you have to look for when the machines are moving at speed. You can see some of these things if you're paying enough attention, but you also have these other things you have to do as well. And, we're a 7-person small business in Michigan. We're not CCI or Winchester or Remington or one of these companies that are employing thousands of people. They're producing. I mean, one of the other problems that people it's hard for them to wrap their brain around is the scale. So a company like CCI is producing something like 1 billion primers a month.
Right.
And so anytime you have to make 1 billion of anything, it becomes a real problem. And it's all just-in-time manufacturing. They're getting the materials they need right when they need to get it, because they don't, especially in the case of primer manufacturing, the priming compound can't be transported in its final form. It's too sensitive. So they have to mix the component chemicals on site, and then it's pumped down into the room where the primers are assembled in a liquid form, and then it dries. So they have to time the delivery of those raw material chemicals so that they don't have too much of them on site at any given point in time. And they also can't have too much of the finished priming compound at any given point in time because there's nowhere to store it. So it has to go right through the production process. And so anytime you put any small amount of disruption into that process, it can really hamper production. They might go from a capacity of 1 billion a month down to 600 million per month, and that's just hard for them to get over, especially when the demand is as high as it is.
I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I try to buy as much as I can. I mean, I just use a Hornady lock and load. I can make maybe 500 rounds an hour, but when all said and done, I mean, it's for me and my father mostly. So that's
stop being poor. Come on.
No, I would love to scale. Honestly, I'm in a master gunsmithing course right now. I'm already a certified gunsmith, but I'm in a master gunsmithing course now, and I would love to open up a facility. I mean, my FFL paperwork is in right now, but what's the purpose? If I do it right now, I can't get the raw materials, and even if I could, I would have to charge so much it wouldn't be worth it.
Right, and the equipment as well. Right now, equipment. For the equipment you really need to run an ammunition company, the equipment you really want to have is very hard to obtain right now, and the lead times are 6 to 12 months. So it's
6 to 12. Three of the companies told me 18.
At most.
Yeah, no, 18.
Yeah, I mean it depends on who you are and who you talk to, and if you're paying cash, all kinds of different things. But yeah, at best it's 6 to 12 months, probably longer. So right now is, everybody sees a big spike in the market and they think, well, now's a great time to get into the business. It's actually not. The best time to get into the business would be save your money right now, go invest in Bitcoin or something else. And then when the market comes back down into a trough, that's when you need to start buying, shipping containers full of primers and putting them in a warehouse someplace, and then waiting until the 2024 election or the 2028 election or whatever it is. And that's the way that you have to think of it in the inverse.
Right.
And also, if you're going to be trying to start an ammunition company, I'm basically speaking to those who were initially thinking of selling their own reloads. Now,
sure.
I mean, of course, Halsey has already talked multiple times about how you have to be really careful about, your reloads, because if you screw up even just a slight miscalculation on the grain, either that bullet would end up as a squib, not fire properly, or it could just blow up a gun. The range I went to this Saturday, they had put up a sign saying, "This is why we do not allow your own reloads." Because someone had it was a revolver pistol, and it blew the pistol wide open. I don't know what happened to the guy, but it was really ugly. And also there's these quality assurance processes that these ammo plants have. I know in Turkey they have one where they have the special equipment to not only to check every other batch of bullets, for how much pressure it takes to actually extract the bullet so it actually fires properly, but they have equipment to make sure that everything is waterproof and that you don't have gas escaping before you actually press the bullet out and so forth. And all kinds of other things, like test firing places where you have a rifle that will automatically fire the shell, so that just in case anything does go wrong, you're not having someone that's shooting these bullets and it just blows up on somebody like a
Sure.
Century Arms AK. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot to this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very evolved process. If you're going to be doing it commercially, especially, you really have to know what you're doing. I mean, we work with remanufactured brass as one of the primary. We use factory new cases for our defensive and competition ammo, but the majority of what we sell uses remanufactured brass, and we have a very particular process. We have a one source supplier who handles all of the processing end of things. So we're very particular about what we accept as raw material. And then on the quality side, we are physically putting every single round that is made in this facility into a check fixture. And with remanufactured brass, that's really the only way that you can do it. I mean, if you check 1 out of every 100 rounds, the variation in brass is so great that that's really a nonsensical, that's not giving you any real data on what you're checking. So very, very few even mainstream commercial remanufacturing companies are willing to go through that. It creates a big bottleneck in the process, which is something that we'll have to solve at some point in time. But yeah, it comes down to having the good equipment, and so that's where you get into the differences between consumer grade presses, something like a Hornady lock and load, or even a Dillon 1050. That's sort of where you start to get into blurring. People are always trying to increase the speed at which they can reload ammo, but when you do that, you're going to sacrifice something, and that's either going to be cost or it's going to be quality assurance. So like in the case of a Dillon 1050, there's just not enough stations on the press to do all of the quality checks that you really need to load commercially viable ammunition at a high rate of speed. I don't care what anybody says. And you know, we started with those things 5 years ago. And I look back at that and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we were able to survive using those presses. But we had them set up in a way that we thought would make the best of those sacrifices. But you know, if you're really going to have sensors on every step of the process, you really have to have industrial grade equipment, and there's just no cheap way to do that. They're $40,000 at a minimum, and they go way up from there. So you have to really make sure that you are, and the gun ranges, you know, there's some good and bad with that. You know, those guys, when we approach gun ranges trying to sell ammo, and we really don't do much of that anymore, because most of them are all about the dollar. If you come in there and you say, hey, I'm ABC Ammo Company, I'm right down the road from you, I can sell you 9mm at X dollars per box, they will look at you and say, well, hey, this other guy can sell it to me for 2 pennies less. So thanks, but no thanks. And you can talk to them until you're blue in the face about your quality process and this and that, but the number of them who are willing to listen is very small. And so then on the converse, they will buy often the cheapest stuff that they can, and then when they have a problem, they'll make a big deal out of it and say, oh, you know, this is why you can't trust reloaded ammo. We don't trust our customers' ammo because of this. This gun blew up. Mm-hmm. But you know, there's always some give and take to be had there.
Yeah, very well said. Because when you're manufacturing ammo, whether it's reloads or whether you're starting your own ammo plant or whatever, you have virtually zero room for error. Because once word gets out that your ammo sucks and that your ammo is dangerous, then yeah, that's going to, especially early on, that's going to tarnish your reputation going forward. And I can imagine it's going to be hell trying to get it back, your good reputation back. I mean, because I know this isn't quite ammo related, but look at Century Arms. They're AKs. Now, I was told not to buy an American-made Century Arms AK because they blow up in your face. I saw videos of it, and now I can't imagine myself ever grabbing one because I don't want a gun blown up in my face. I mean, they say get a Romanian one instead, but I don't know if Century Arms was ever gonna come back from that or what.
Yeah, it can be tough, and because of the law of large numbers, you're going to have a problem eventually. I mean, for example, last year we made something like 6.5 million rounds of ammo for the year. So if you think about if you have any kind of statistical background, you say if I was to tell my customers that we have a 99.999% good rate in terms of production. We have one defect per 100,000 rounds. Well, how many defects does that mean that we put out into the marketplace if we made 6.5 million rounds last year? So it doesn't really matter. I mean, you really have to have a good handle on quality. It's something that you have to continually address. That's where we put most of our money into, honestly, is every time we get to the point where we have some available cash or we're starting to get over the hump, we look around and we say, okay, what can we automate? How can we squeeze a little bit more efficiency out of this process in a way that still maintains safety and quality? We're not going to sacrifice speed of manufacturing for taking a couple of sensors off the machine and running quickly through our quality checks. It's just not worth it, because you have one bad deal with a big gun range, and these days anybody can get on the internet and say anything, and you don't know who you're selling to. I mean, we in particular have focused very heavily on the competitive shooting market and also the tactical training market. So we're selling ammo to people who are competing at major national competitions that are attracting hundreds of shooters. They have big sponsors, they have media there, they have people, competitive shooters that have big Facebook and Instagram and Twitter accounts. You have some of these tactical training companies that have a lot of presence on social media, and they're doing pretty high level training with people that are in law enforcement, special forces, etc. So if you start to get a bad reputation in the eyes of just a few people that really matter in the community, then you can have a big problem. I mean, I'm not one to call anybody out by name. I mean, every company's had issues, but I've seen bad ammo from every single company in the market. I've seen ammo from the big four with no primer. I've seen upside down bullets. I've seen Makarov cases in 9mm ammo. I mean, I've seen everything that you can possibly see. So you have to be as ahead of the game as you possibly can. And unfortunately, in this industry, there's just no cheap way to do that, which is why it's hard. There's a barrier to entry in this business that it's very hard to bring that down to a point where somebody can really get into it at a low cost.
I mean,
right.
I was just, everyone on the show knows. I mean, I caught a squib load back in, as I said, in July, and I had to have surgery to get bullet fragments out of my hand. I mean, it wasn't,
Wow. Yeah.
that's one bad bullet, it's not a joke when you're playing around with it, because people ask us a lot, like, I want to start reloading. What should I do to first start reloading? And I said, you should make sure that you're working with someone who can actually teach you what to do well, because the margin for error is zero.
Sure.
you could screw up and you can kill yourself.
Yeah, and on top of that, the other thing I wanted to add, and I'm sure our guest knows this, is that if you're definitely serious about starting an ammo company, you've got to get experienced people. Just like Halsey has said, and experienced people, they're going to require experienced money, of course.
Sure. Yeah, they're not cheap. You want to have good operators. We think we pay our guys well, and it's definitely taken them a long time to get to the point where they can. In some cases, we may have one operator running 2-3 presses at the same time, and they're competent enough to do that. And we have things set up in a way that we can do that with the amount of safety sensors that we have in place. It's not difficult for them to do that. But for your average person to walk in and try to do that off the street is just not going to happen. And in the consumer reloading world, the same thing. If you're reloading for precision rifle shooting, for example, you're loading 6-Dasher or 6BR, something like that. You're doing that one case at a time, one round at a time. Those guys are super particular, so they're measuring things out to the 10th of a grain. And in that case, because the volume, they may only be making 25 or 50 rounds in an hour, but each one is perfect. It's much harder to screw that up than it is if you're just blowing through 2,000 rounds of 9mm while you're drinking a Coors Light and watching the game on a Sunday because you shoot USPSA or something like that, a high volume type match. That's where I see most of the problems, I will tell you. I don't know that I've ever heard of a PRS shooter that I know who has blown up a rifle or done anything colossally stupid, but I shoot a lot of IDPA and 3-gun and USPSA myself, and that's where that's where you'll see guys with a squib in a gun, or they show up to the match and they had to run all this ammo the night before so that they could shoot the match, and they get there and it wasn't resized properly or something like that, and they're just running through problems the whole day. They're racking out rounds every other magazine, and it ruins their day. And I sort of chuckle to myself when I see it, because I just think to myself, like, that here's somebody that got into reloading because they wanted to save money, but they're not taking it as serious as they should. And these are the guys that are running a wire brush through their 2011 mags in between every stage. But they didn't take the time to case gauge all their ammo before they showed up. So it's kind of funny to me, but
no, I'm with you on that.
Not so much to them.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you on that. I mean, look, it's one of those things. I mean, I've been doing it since I'm probably 16 years old, and my father's done it since before I was born. So learning how and learning how to put the quality into it, it's second nature to us now, and we still have problems every now and then. It's not often, and now we just got new magnetic sensors, so we're not even really all that worried about the problems we did have. But I mean, with the one bad bullet that I had, it was just an overcharge of powder,
Sure.
and you just couldn't have called it,
Yeah. And depending on what you're loading, an overcharge or an undercharge can be a very, very tight margin for error. I mean, that's why we have never really ventured into some of the real oddball calibers. Like we get asked to reload 5.7 by 28 all the time. And that's a round in particular where if you make a 0.3 of a grain difference, then you can blow up a probably expensive gun. Whereas with 9mm, if you make a half of a grain mistake, that's not terrible if you're not loading something that's plus P or at the ragged edges of SAMI pressure rating. A half a grain plus or minus is not good. I mean, that's not acceptable from a quality standpoint, but it's not the end of the world. But you can double charge a 9mm case very easily. You can triple charge a 38 special case if you really want. So,
speaking of, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so speaking of ammo calibers, now I just bought a pistol. It's a Zastava M57. Now, unlike Canada, finding this ammunition in the U.S. is actually kind of hard, and when you do, it's usually kind of expensive. And I'm sure you're familiar with it, right?
Is that 7.62 by 54?
No, 7.62 by 25. This is a pistol.
Oh, by 25. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other Zastava.
Yeah. Tokarev ammo.
Good luck.
Yeah. So there is a shop that is near me, and they say that they have a guy that will occasionally, make reloads for that ammo. I was wondering if you knew anything about the margin of error for that particular round, or maybe I just have to speak to the guy that actually comes in and actually sells them the rounds.
I don't. You can typically, we use Hodgdon powder in almost everything we do. We use a couple of Vitavori powders here and there, but almost everything we do is Hodgdon powder. So you can go to Hodgdon's website, and they actually have a great reloading calculator tool, whatever you call it, load data center. And so you can search by caliber, and it will bring up all of the load data that they have for their powders, as well as Winchester powders and IMR powders. And it's searchable by caliber as well as the grain weight of the projectile. So you can, and what they will show for each is minimum load and maximum load for that powder and the corresponding velocity. It'll show the length of the test barrel that they used, the brand of primer that they use. So it's pretty comprehensive. And so that's where I would go. And you can see, okay, if the difference between minimum and maximum load is only 0.4 of a grain, well, that's pretty close. And it might be that for some powders, if you're using a really fast pistol powder like Tight Group that's got a very high burn rate, the margin for that is going to be much tighter than a slower burning powder like, say, HS6 or Long Shot, something like that, that's designed for larger calibers or longer barrel lengths where the burn rate is a bit longer. The margin for the pressure isn't going to build as quickly, so the margin for error is greater. So it will partially depend on, I'm not familiar with the volume of that case, but it will depend on the volume of the case, and then the burn rate of the powder you're using, and the projectile weight as it corresponds to velocity, and you can get a pretty good idea of what you're looking at there.
Yep. And that being said, guys, don't use black powder for your reloads.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. Well, and that's funny you say that. That is why things like if you look at, say, a 38 special case, you think, geez, this is a huge ass case for a sort of mid-weight bullet. It's the same as weight as a 9mm bullet in most cases, but the case is ridiculously long and the velocity is less. So what the hell? And that's because 38 special was designed at a time when they were still using black powder, and at a time when smokeless powder had much less energy density than what it has today. So over time, as powders have gotten better, powder technology has gotten better, the need for such a ridiculously large case. I mean, if you open up a 38 special round, you'll see that the case is only about a third full.
If that, yeah.
And if that, and so when you look at more modern calibers where the cases are much smaller, you can kind of understand why, as powder technology has gotten better, we just don't need that amount of space, which is great. It makes for a more compact firearm.
I mean, we reload 38 special just because it works in the 357s that we have, and we don't have to put all the money into the 357 rounds, But I mean, you're right. It is weird like that. I mean, I personally enjoy doing also the specialty rounds. Like we have a 30 caliber Herret, so making the rounds for that is really enjoyable. It's time consuming as hell, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. We stick to real basic calibers because, as I said, we cut our teeth with competitive shooting and training. So it's 99%. 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP, and 223. So really the range of our calibers, the only two oddballs that we have are 300 Blackout because I like it.
I was about to say because it's awesome.
Caliber. And,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is awesome. I mean, it doesn't have everybody. Unfortunately, 300 Blackout, for the most part, has turned out to be exactly like what they said 6.8 SPC was. Like 8 years ago, everybody was going to be shooting 6.8 SPC. It was going to put the 223 rifles out of the business. You're an idiot if you shoot anybody with a 223. It's not powerful enough. Blah blah blah. 6.8. And then, who do you know anybody that owns a 6.8 rifle? I mean, I have one because, again, I can, and we've played with it here and there. But unfortunately, Blackout has kind of started to go that way. We thought we'd have way more demand for that than some of the niche stuff. Subsonic Blackout is a decent seller, and there's good margin in that product. But the only other one we do in addition to that is 10mm, and that's because 10mm is awesome.
Yep.
And 10mm is having a big resurgence, and there are a lot of real hardcore 10mm guys that want real 10mm ammo, and they're very disappointed with most of the commercial offerings because it's basically a 40 Smith & Wesson load in a 10mm case at a 10mm price. And so when we're able to sell them a true full power 10mm load, going 1350 feet per second, they're really happy with that. So even though it's not something that's ever really used in competition or training, it's just too expensive to do that. It's fun for us, and there's enough margin in it that we can do a run a month and have a pretty good run of it.
So I got two questions for you now, because one of them I couldn't answer, And one of them is just an interesting one. I think I could answer it, but someone from the chat says, speaking of ignorance, I saw a video showing the military is starting to use plastic casings for ammo. Is there any truth to this? I've seen it. I've seen the test firings.
Yep. What is the name of it now? I can't remember the brand name, but yeah, they are experimenting with polymer cases. They haven't had a ton of luck with like sustained fully automatic fire. The problem is you have to have a polymer that's able to withstand the super high temperatures inside the breech, and it has to be able to be linked. It has to be able to be stable in big temperature swings. You know, the military, sometimes they're in the desert, sometimes they're in the Arctic. So finding a polymer that will work well in all those scenarios is difficult. And they've been working on this for years. I mean, I saw plastic or polymer cases, you know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And that's when it was getting into the light of the public, where you would see like articles written about it and what have you. So they haven't been experimenting with it for a long time. I don't know whether they'll ever get to the point where it's viable, but they are looking at other designs. I mean, you see we use a case made by a company called Shell Shock Technologies in Connecticut. It's a 2-piece design. It's half aluminum and half stainless steel. And it basically solves 99% of the problems with brass cases. They're way more consistent. They can hold more pressure. They're half the weight. They're magnetic. So you can pick them up with a magnet. There's a lot of advantages to them, but it's a new technology. And so anytime we've looked at bidding on a couple of large contracts and we wanted to use that particular case, and they said, well, we won't accept anything with steel case because reasons. And so we have to explain to them, okay, this is not, you know, tool ammo. This is not like a lacquered steel case that's designed to be cheap. This is actually better in many significant ways, but this industry is like trying to steer the Titanic. Most of the companies in this industry have been here for a long time. They're very, very set in their ways. They are very unwilling to change, and changing people's minds on things like what material a case is made out of seems trivial, but it's actually fairly difficult. You know, there's a lot. This industry is great because of how much information is out there on the web, and it also sucks for that reason because there are so many myths and, you know, internet rumors and FUD talk and what have you. It's really hard to sort through what's good and what's bad sometimes.
Okay, so I have one more question before we take off.
Sure.
For some reason, a lot of people I know are buying 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yep.
I never have seen this before. Why is that? That's what I'm having trouble answering.
Sure. So 6.5 Creedmoor, and I will, I'm sure whoever's listening to this podcast will probably get somebody fact checking me, what have you. So I will start this by saying I'm not a PRS shooter. I'm not really even a long range shooter. I own one rifle chambered in .308 and I have a Garand in 30-06, but those are the two like big calibers that I own. So 6.5 Creedmoor is effectively, if you want to summarize it as one thing, it's a much more efficient version of .308 Winchester. So the bullet is longer and thinner, so they can have better coefficients of friction, better ballistics. So you can have roughly the same amount of powder firing a bullet that is going to have less drop over 1,000 yards than .308. So it makes the effective engagement distance longer, and the amount of wind drift it will have over that distance is less. And that's where you see, you know, 6.5 Creedmoor now in the PRS world is kind of like, bro, you're still shooting 6.5 Creedmoor? You're like a FUD. You know, you might as well be showing up with a leather holstered revolver. You know, they've got 6mm BR Norma, there's 6mm Dasher, 6 GT. So these are all 6mm bullets, half a millimeter thinner than Creedmoor, but they're all trying to get to the point where they can have the least amount of drop and the least amount of wind drift over say 1,000 or 1,500 yards, where you have these PRS competitions are between maybe say 500 and 1,500 yards. Again, I'm not a PRS shooter, so don't quote me on the exactness of how they run their competitions, but that's the idea. They're trying to extract every bit of accuracy that they can. So Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor was kind of the beginning of that. Now it's become very mainstream, and it's now being replaced by even more, you could call them radical designs, where people are really trying to get the ballistics to a certain amount of perfection. There's a guy here in Michigan, Brian Litz. Now I'm going to blank on the name of his company. Well, in any case, he's kind of one of the country's foremost experts on ballistics, and he has a ton of information out there about the differences between these big rifle calibers.
Yeah, I made the mistake of telling everybody that I wasn't so into rifles about a year ago. Now I got an AR-15, I got an AR-10 and 308, I got an AK-47, I have an upper for my AR-15 that shoots a 50 caliber Bullwolf. Like,
oh yeah,
it's not that fun to shoot, but man, I could stop a Chevy Impala if I wanted to.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's the AR is a fantastic platform, and I mean, you can see even on the wall behind me, there's let's see, two different calibers. The one on the top is 450 Bushmaster, which is popular here in Michigan and in Ohio as well, because we have restrictions. You can hunt with rifles in Michigan above this sort of imaginary arbitrary line that's drawn basically midway through the mitten. But even then, and then downstate, you can use straight wall cartridges. So 450 Bushmaster looks like 44 Magnum, but it's maybe half an inch longer, and it's holding a 250 to 300 grain bullet, and it can chamber in an AR. So now you can go hunt with an AR, and you have a 45, really heavy 45 caliber bullet, super effective within 200. It's got a lot of drop after 200 yards, but nobody's hunting whitetail in Michigan beyond 200 yards. No matter what they tell you, they're lying. If they tell you they dropped that buck at 400 yards, they're lying almost assuredly. Everybody adds 150 yards to their longest shot when they're asked. It's like fishing stories.
Yeah, of course.
You're right.
Well, guys,
you're here.
Oh no, go ahead. We still got some time. Ask a question.
Okay,
yeah, I've got time, guys. So if you guys have other stuff or chats or whatever, feel free.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you now. I'm a big fan of 7.92 by 57, which is 8mm. Now, Do you sell that or reload it or do anything with it, or what's your experience or knowledge on it?
Basically zero. So, like I said, we really we had to decide about a year and a half ago. I looked at our company. I said, what are we going to be? We don't have the resources to be somebody like Hornaday, who can make 100 different calibers and 10 different varieties of each of those calibers. We just don't have the resources. That's too much work in process. It's too much money sunk into inventory. So we looked at it and we said, okay, what are the high volume things we want to do? And that, competitive shooting, I know guys that shoot twice a weekend, every weekend, the entire year. And so they go through 1,000 to 2,000 rounds a week between competition and practice. Well, that sounds awesome. I want to sell to those people, even though the margin on 9mm is a lot less than it might be for some of these exotic rifle cartridges. Even though hunting is popular here in Michigan, this is a couple of weeks ago during the hunting season, you start getting calls for 30-30 and Win Mag and 30-06, and those guys are great, but they're only buying 20 rounds at a time, and that's just not sustainable for us. So we've actually pared down our caliber list pretty significantly. When we first started, we sold 380, we sold 38 Special, 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, even 45 Colt, and we dropped most of those midway through last year, and then at the beginning of this year, we dropped 380 and 38 Special as well, because the volume just wasn't there for us to make and sell 50 to 60,000 rounds of 38 Special in a year. It sounds like a lot of ammo, but it's really not. And so for us to reduce the number of SKUs and reduce the number of caliber changes we have to do on the equipment the amount of inventory items we have to stock as far as raw material, box sizes, labels, all those things. We decided to get real narrow and say, okay, we're going to have basically 3 or 4 product lines: competition, training, defensive, and frangible would be the other category we fill. And that was simply because there's a dearth of frangible ammunition in the market. And a lot of the tactical companies that we work with do close-in CQB training or close-in training with steel targets where that's just a must and they have to have it. So we decided to fill that niche as well.
All right. One random question I wanted to ask you is that now, do you ever have guys that will randomly that are working at the plant, try to, sneak a box or 2 home?
Other than myself, we're like I said, we're a pretty small company. There's 6 people here and then me, so 7 total. My brother is our production manager. Let's see, his best friend is one of our machine operators. One of his other best friends is one of our other machine operators. And so almost everybody here is somebody that we know pretty well. They're either family or family adjacent. And do I really worry? I mean, if somebody grabbed a box, it really wouldn't bother me all that much, but I would really highly doubt that that's the case. But I mean, I encourage them to get into, last Christmas, we gave everybody a Trijicon optic. The Christmas before that, we gave everybody a suppressor. This year, we're getting everybody, either a bonus in cash or a gun. And I pay for training. We work with a training company here in Michigan that's probably one of the best in the country. And if they want to take a training class, I'll pay for it. I don't care what it is, because I want them to be experts in this field that we work in, and I want them to be comfortable talking to people about their experiences and really understanding the intricacies of what they're doing. So I would say if any of them needed ammo for anything, they would just ask me, and I would say, yeah, go ahead, grab a box off the shelf. And we have, like, I would call them sort of factory seconds, ammo that will physically chamber gauge, but maybe there's something wrong with it that we don't want to put it into a customer's box. It's discolored, or it's got some kind of a big ugly scratch on the side, something like that. So that stuff builds up over time. And so we have piles of ammo that we use for demos. We use for like range day events. We use it for training classes. We have a couple of sponsored shooters that we will give that stuff to them for training purposes, things like that. So there's no shortage of, I mean, I could walk back in the plant and probably pick up 50 rounds of 9mm off the floor that have rolled under tables or underneath the machines, things like that. So, in the grand scheme of things, if we make 15 million rounds this year, which we probably will, and one of these guys grabbed 50 rounds off the shelf, it's not worth it for me to know, but they're all really good guys. So I would say that's unlikely.
Someone in the chat wants to know if you're interested in getting into suppressor design.
Are we interested in getting into suppressor design to actually manufacture them ourselves?
Yeah.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because most of the companies that are designing suppressors don't really know what the hell they're doing either. So we have a really good relationship with a company here in Michigan called GSL Technology. I own many of their, that suppressor right there is a GSL, that is a GSL. They also make parts for many other suppressor companies. They actually manufacture all of Gemtech suppressors at their factory. So one of the reasons that their suppressors are so good is because the guy who owns the company is an expert in the baffle design, and he's been doing it for 30 plus years. So the design of the baffle is very important to not only lower the overall decibel rating or the overall decibels of the shot, but you can also change the tone. So that's one of the reasons I like not to plug them too hard, but GSL suppressors, they make the tone of the shot very, very bassy, very low. So even though they might reduce the sound of the gunshot by 30 decibels, the same as another brand, it actually appears to be much quieter because it changes the tone of the shot as well as the overall loudness of the shot. So suppressor manufacturing is really something that you shouldn't. I mean, I have a couple of suppressors that we got from a company in trade way back in our first year of business. And it was the first suppressors I had ever owned. I put them on the gun and I shot them, and I was so disappointed. I almost decided to like not even get into the suppressor world at all, because I thought, well, that wasn't even all that good. This thing sucks. And then I shot real high quality suppressors, and I said, oh, okay, well, that's why I was shooting a garbage suppressor. So, you know, I won't, again, call out any company by name, but there are a lot of people out there making suppressors that are nothing more than stacks of washers inside of a metal tube, and you can call yourself a suppressor company. One thing that I am interested in is 3D printed suppressors. We are working with a couple of guys that we got connected with on Twitter who are headlining that. We are going to be getting a 3D printer of our own shortly here for other reasons, but you can bet that we will be playing around with printed receivers and printed suppressors, because that's fucking awesome.
Oh, I didn't even say that's the second half of his statement. He said, are you interested in suppressor design? He said, and manufacturing using the new 3D printing with metal and sintering.
Yeah, so the one we're getting is not a metal 3D printer, but the company that we're getting it from does make metal 3D printers. I mean, the problem for us right now is just cost. You know, even a cheap metal 3D printer is north of $100,000. And if I had that money, I'd be getting equipment for ammunition manufacturing. So I don't think, I mean, we do have an 07 license, which would allow us to manufacture firearms. And we do have an 03, or I'm sorry, an 02 SOT. So we could manufacture suppressors and any other NFA item that we wanted. But I just don't see the reason to get into it. There are so many good AR companies right now and so many good suppressor companies. For us to try to invest capital into branching out into a different area of the business would be foolish right now, until we get to the point where we're manufacturing perfect ammunition in all the calibers that we want to manufacture in the volumes that we want to manufacture. Then it's probably not going to be something that we'll do. I'd be more apt to work with a local company like GSL or BG Defense in Grand Rapids. That's the green rifle behind me is one of theirs. Great company. If we were going to make our own firearms, I would probably start with having them produce something with our name on it and then make adjustments to it over time to the point where we might start bringing things in-house. But you know, unfortunately, you can't do everything. I would be much quicker to invest the money into manufacturing our own projectiles and our own brass cases from raw material here than I would get into firearm or suppressor manufacturing.
Awesome. Well, I can't buy. New Jersey's a non-suppressor state. We're one of the 8 that doesn't allow it at all. So
you got to move, man. You got to move.
Oh, that's a year away. And then I'm looking to be out
New
of here.
Jersey.
You know.
Yeah.
But
there. Oh, Andy Martin was asking you about an AR from Yugoslavia.
Never heard of one.
Nor have I.
Yeah.
If that exists, tell me.
That's interesting, you know, because it was funny back when our company used to have a Facebook and an Instagram page before we were summarily banned on both platforms. I had made a post about Kamala Harris. She said some idiot thing about banning the import of AR-15s. And I posted, well, okay, fine, because like literally none of them are imported. I mean, even things like, you know, FN's factory is in South Carolina. So even theoretically foreign branded rifles are still made here. So like, okay, it highlighted that she's got no idea what she's talking about. And after she became the vice presidential candidate, that post got drug back up, because at the time she was, you know, still trying to vie for the presidential spot. So even though our pages were both deleted and banned, that post resurged a couple of months ago. So I got a little laugh out of that. and then I cried. But
No, I hear you on that. It's going to be a different world, that's for sure. If they actually get in.
Yeah, I had faith in the Supreme Court. I'm not so sure that I do now. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like they're willing to put themselves out there. So we'll see. We'll see what gun cases they decide to take. If they start taking a rash of gun cases, then I'll be happy. And we communicate quite a lot with FTC, and we know what they're up to, so we have an idea of what their hopes are. But
well, I got to run after this, but you know what though, this might give you a little bit of hope. I've often criticized the NRA because they tend to just take like the most BS cases, and then kind of declare victory. And I had spoken to one of their guys at Legislative Affairs, and I said, look, you guys, getting a carry permit in New Jersey is basically impossible. And all of these bullshit gun laws, why aren't you challenging these laws? And he said, listen, I have to be honest with you. We only take cases where we think 90% we can win. And right. I said, okay, but why? And he said, because we could set precedent that might hurt other states.
Sure.
If the courts rule that this type of restriction is okay, other states will move to implement it, not fearing the constitutional ramifications of it. And people don't realize that. I thought, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I that is true, and then of course the am I allowed to say this on YouTube? I don't know. The sick collapsitarian in me sort of wants that to happen to, kind of push that black pill a little further down the throat. But the NRA is what they are. I think there's a lot to be there. There's something that's never going to go away that we just have to deal with, and I wish we could reform them in the way that we wish they would be, but.
Oh, but I forgot the red pill part of it is that they've now filed against carry in New Jersey, they filed against the assault weapons ban in Maryland, and they filed against pistol permits in New York City. So, I guess right now with Barrett being added, maybe they've got some new kind of renewed vigor. Where they think they might win.
I think they could. It just depends on whether they're going to take the case or not. I'm nervous. I don't know. I don't know. I think Thomas and ACB and Alito are pretty solid. I would think Kavanaugh is, but I don't. Him and Gorsuch. We haven't seen them in a gun case where we can really get a solid handle on how, 2A they really are. Are they closer to the sort of libertarian, everybody has a tank in their yard, or are they closer to the more sort of FUD hunter, nobody needs a 30-round mag, but I support the Second Amendment type. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, that kind of stuff worries me too.
Yeah. So, that reminds me. Now someone did a video about his name was Brandon something, I forgot. So their ATF is now trying to come after the it was like the AK-74 pistols and like AR pistols and stuff like that because reasons. So they're trying to find a way to ban that. Do you guys have any insight on that?
I don't. I'm not an AK guy, so I will say I'm a little bit ignorant of that. But I believe that had something to do with the caliber, correct? Where it's that, and I could be totally wrong, but that's part of what they're doing with these pistol braces is they're saying we have to look at the totality of the circumstances to determine what is a pistol and what is not. So I suspect that it might have something to do with the caliber itself. That was also an issue with the steel core, M855 ammo. They were trying to get rid of that because they were saying, well, now that we have all these pistol AR-15s, all of a sudden now 5.56 could be a pistol round, and thus this would fall into the purview of armor-piercing ammunition for a handgun, which is not legal to be possessed. So I will say I don't know, because I'm not ashamed to say I don't know, but I suspect it has something to do with the caliber as well as the fact that it's an 8K, and they're as you can see again behind me, this gun here at the bottom, this is a 9mm AK with a pistol brace. I mean, that's a hell of a pistol brace. That's about as non-brace as you can get while still being a brace. I guess I'll put it that way. So I suspect that maybe the AK braces, they're looking at those and going, okay, that's basically a stock. I mean, so yeah, it could also be that.
Okay, guys, I got to run, but thank you very much for coming, man. We really enjoyed this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Likewise.
Anytime.
And you're welcome to come back anytime. Guys, visit his website, Fenix Ammunition, phoenixammo.com, right?
Yep, phoenixammo.com. Right now what you want to do is sign up for our in-stock notifications. The primer supply is very limited, so when we get them, we make runs, we put it up for sale. I mean, last Friday we sold 100,000 rounds of 9mm in less than 40 minutes. And so we don't do any pre-orders at this point. We may get to the point where we do that in January, and we will announce if and when we decide to do that. But for now, sign up for the in-stock notifications, and when you get that notification email, you got to act quick, because there are people that waited 41 minutes and didn't get what they wanted. So we're doing our best. We're working as much as we can with the materials that we can get when we get it. So we appreciate your support.
Yeah, I found 22 long rifle for $10 a box for 100, and by the time I hit add to cart, it was sold out.
Gone.
Yep. Happened to me too. As soon as I hit add to cart, tried to check out, it was bam, gone.
Well, guys, thank you very much for coming out. Thank you, Justin, for joining us. Shogun, thank you very much. And I shall see everybody later tonight, where we'll be talking. It'll just be me at 10 o'clock. Thank you guys very much for coming.
All right, see ya.
Fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
In all honesty, a border wall or steel slats won't work. But great bodies of water will separate us from the horrible Mexican rapists. Introducing the 2019 Trump Great Border Moat. Stocked with the most aggressive penis fish, incredible man-eating alligators, and unbelievable genetically modified moose-cocked rape dolphins, as well as flying, migrant-eating sharkfish. So incredible.
I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do. So help me God. Thank you and good night.